part 2 of the Hoth Hangout podcast this week is going to cover all of Star Wars Celebration, which it's honestly, I think it's the most difficult part about talking about all of the announcements we got is where do we start? I mean, I guess I can just list it and we can pick and choose where we want to start based off of our levels of excitement. But I think maybe the biggest thing we got from the weekend was 3 new movies. One being directed by Dave Filoni, New Republic era. A Dawn of the Jedi movie being directed by James Mangold. The new post-Episode 9 movie with Daisy Ridley returning as Rey, taking place 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. Should be interesting. We'll definitely dive more into those 3 films. And then, of course, we get the TV stuff with Ahsoka coming out later this year. Lots of cast reveals and announcements there, including an incredible trailer, which if anyone hasn't seen that trailer, definitely need to go watch that. I was floored. We'll talk about the story of how Joey and I think, watched that trailer. Skeleton Crew announcements. Acolyte. I'm incredibly pumped for both of those shows, particularly Acolyte. I am so excited to get just new Star Wars content in general always, but particularly when it pertains to the dark side stuff. I like that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And then Andor Season
Sith
2.
Lord.
Yeah, I'm the Sith Lord here. And then Andor Season 2 coming later next year in 2024 towards the end of the summer. All the other great stuff coming next month on May the 4th. Visions. Season 2 with Star Wars Young Jedi, kind of that children's show that we've talked about a few times here on the podcast. And then a second season of Tales of the Jedi announced, and Bad Batch Season 3. The final season, a little bit surprisingly, of that show is confirmed as well. There is literally so much to talk about. Joey, where do you want to start? Because I am so pumped to talk about any of it. I'm cool with wherever you want to start.
I mean, let's just go from the top down.
All right.
Yeah.
So we got a overview as part of Star Wars Celebration.
Well, let's start. Let me start it.
Okay. Yeah.
So, what day was that? Was that Friday morning?
Yes. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. This Joey's gonna tell the story of the intro into Star Wars Celebration, and maybe a little bit of backstory to your story. And I won't give anything away of what Joey's gonna talk about. But in my mind, I had almost forgot that Star Wars Celebration was happening that day. I mean, I knew it was, but I didn't know how early it was because, of course, it was taking place in London. And so I think they were starting at like noon or something there, which for us is like 5 a.m, right? And so I don't know why I woke up at that time that morning. Is one of those moments in your life where you're like, wow, that was really lucky that I woke up that early. Because I checked my phone and I had like a YouTube notification, right? And it was like Star Wars official has gone live or something like that. I was like, what? They're starting early. And so I watched it. And anyways, so it was just kind of like random chance that I was awake at 5 a.m. when all of this dropped. And so I messaged Joey, and that kind of leads into Joey's part of the story.
So that was Ben's side of the story. So my side of the story was my daughter had woken up early. Once again, and we were up, it was a late night for us and all this. So and then I get a message. So one thing you guys need to know about me and Ben, a lot of the conversations that start with me and Ben is me asking Ben something and me asking, hey Ben, are you ready to record this day? Hey, are we okay with this? Or so it's always me initiating. Not that day. So on Friday I get a message at 7:21 a.m.
Oh, that was later than I thought. I don't know why I thought it was earlier.
It was 7:21. Here's the message. Low key, I'm so pumped. Potential emergency pod might be necessary. I can't believe how much good news I woke up to. And me in the, I hadn't slept all night. I kind of wasn't. I was in the same state where it didn't register that even Celebration had started. I knew it was happening on Friday, but I didn't realize it started. so I'm like, oh, I guess I could have been watching that too. And then he basically says, have you looked at Twitter the past couple of hours? I'm like, oh my God, I haven't. And I haven't even thought of it. So then, of course, then I scour Twitter and everything is there ready. And and all I say is, "Oh dang." That was my response to him. Was like, "Oh dang." And when I say there's a lot of news, it's a lot. That's what Ben responds with. So, yeah, there was a lot of excitement Friday early morning, and rightfully so after all the stuff that we saw.
Yeah, I was so excited after watching. I think it was the Ahsoka trailer was what I watched first. I was so excited that I literally sat up in my bed, was like doing one of those like these moments. You know what do they call it?
In our thumbnails, basically.
Yeah, but like when they see it in sports games. Oh, the surrender cobra. Have you ever heard it referred to as?
No, I don't. Oh,
Because
that's right.
if you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can see what I'm doing. But like whenever a sports fan's team has just lost, they'll put their hands behind their head, so that it almost looks like the head of a cobra, and their mouth is open. That's what I
Yeah,
was. That's what I was doing when I was.
that's
I was
funny.
surrender cobraing after I
Nice,
watched the Ahsoka trailer. But
nice.
it was truly like so exciting for me. I didn't go back to bed, and B, I started binging all these different YouTube videos on like lore and just stuff I was interested in after watching the trailer. It is such a fun and exciting era for Star Wars. And I think to kind of put myself in check a little bit, I think we also have to remember that a lot of this stuff we're not going to see for at least a year. Thankfully, Ahsoka is one of the things that we will get to see in the nearer future. Uh, but a lot of this stuff doesn't have like even a date yet. And so while it's cool to get excited for it, that's something I have to tell myself like, all right, chill out. It might be like 2025 by the time we see, some of this stuff, for example. So especially the movies when it comes to the films. Like, I don't think any of these three movies they announced are going to, I'd be shocked if any of them are out in 2024. I think it's pretty likely that we'll probably see the, I would say the Daisy Ridley one first is the vibe I'm getting. I could see this being like a summer 2025 or even like a December 2025
Hmm.
release. And then the
Then every
James,
2 years after, maybe type of deal.
yeah. It also just depends, especially with Dave's movie, the one that's going to sort of fit into the Mandoverse timeline. It also just depends on how much of the Mando story they want to tell in the show prior to filming the movie or showing the movie, I guess. Like, if they want the movie to be like the thing that ties it all together, I don't think we even get that movie for like 5 years, 6 years, maybe. So it's cool. It is fantastic that Dave is getting a chance to direct a film. I think it's something that Star Wars fans have wanted for over a decade now. But to be realistic, this might not be something we get for at least 5 more years if they're wanting it to be the thing that concludes the Mando universe and storyline. Part of the kind of overview of this entire new era they're ushering in, they gave us a timeline. And if you're watching the video version of the podcast, we'll put it up on the screen here at this moment so you can take a look at it if you haven't seen it yet. But it basically breaks down all the eras of Star Wars that are now officially considered canon. And what I mean by that is they're not just an era, because I guess that's always been canon, but now we're going to be exploring stories in those eras, which will also be canon, which is a dream come true for so many Star Wars fans. I think I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a ton of Old Republic stuff, but worth noting that the timeline does include the Old Republic, which makes me super hopeful for lots of fantastic Star Wars in the future, even though it wasn't something that was directly addressed at Star Wars Celebration. Those timelines, or those eras in the timeline, of course, being Dawn of the Jedi, which the second of the films announced, the one that's going to be directed by James Mangold, will take place during this era. This is pre-Old Republic, largely based off the Dawn of the Jedi comics as well as the Dawn of the Jedi novel. And so this will kind of be like the origin of the Jedi. It's going to focus a lot on. I actually just listened to the audiobook of Dawn of the Jedi for the second time, like last month. on like Ashla and Bogan, which is very
Mm.
early conceptions of like the light and the dark side. And then there's this thing called the Ricotta Empire. I don't know if they're going to go into all that stuff, but more or less it's going to be, I think, the origins of like how all this started on this planet. In the novel is called Tython. I don't know if they'll take that same planet as the approach for the film, but pretty cool to see it coming to live action hopefully in the next few years. And then of course the Old Republic, which I've already talked about a little bit, the High Republic, and then we get into the era of the films that we know and love, with the fall of the Jedi during the prequel era, the reign of the Empire during the original trilogy, then the Age of the Rebellion, followed by the New Republic, which is sort of that Mando era we're in right now, followed by the Rise of the First Order, which is the sequel trilogy, and then the New Jedi Order, which is the Rey film that we are going to be getting, taking place 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. I think this movie is the one that most fans focused on when they heard this information. Don't get me wrong, people were really excited about the Filoni film, and of course, the Dawn of the Jedi one is a really cool concept to think about too. But naturally, when you hear news about Daisy Ridley, who, for anyone I guess that doesn't know, played Rey in the sequel films, which are obviously very polarizing movies. Some people love them, some people hate them. Uh, what was your initial reaction when you heard this news? Because mine is not what I think people might think my reaction would be.
Okay.
I'm curious what yours was.
Well, to go back to where I saw the tweet, I saw the tweet that I saw that she was on stage.
Hmm.
And without any context, I saw that she was on stage, and I'm like, "Oh, that's nice that she came back for, for celebration. That's cool." But then I went ahead and read the tweet, and I dove into everything. I got to find more information on this, where, this is actually a movie coming out. So, um, I I really liked Rey as a character in the sequel trilogies. I got her lightsaber from when I was at Disney World. So I was super excited to see her return. I was always worried that the all the actors from the sequel trilogy had left a bad taste in their mouths because of um, kind of the reaction from the Star Wars fans. Not all of them, but some of them, and how maybe they'll never come back to Star Wars because of it. So that was kind of my concern going when after the sequel trilogies were done. But to see her come back, however, because 2019 was the last movie, right? So 4 years later, to come back to Star Wars and reprise her role. I was super excited to see it. Now I want to see John Boyega. Now I want to see Oscar Isaac. I mean, maybe I'm being a little selfish, but I think they did because one of my problems with the sequel trilogy, I think they did Finn so dirty. So I
Hmm.
think they did him wrong, because they really set him up early on. Because if you remember in that first teaser trailer with for Force Awakens, he was the one wielding the lightsaber. So you're of course you're gonna think he's the Force sensitive one. Turns out he's not the one. It's Rey, which is fine. But then to come back in the Rise of Skywalker to be like, oh, by the way, I'm Force sensitive, and I'm like, wait, how did what? No, you can't say do that, and then So I feel they did they did wrong by his character. So I would love to see him be a part of this new Jedi Order to help out Rey, or maybe he's one of the students. Probably in 15 years, I'm sure he'd be a knight or a Jedi Knight at least at that point. So I think I was super excited when I saw the announcement for her to come back, reprising her role for Ezra.
Yeah, I think the inclination from people who didn't like the sequels is to think, "Oh no," you know what I mean? I see it the opposite way, and as someone who doesn't have a particular love for the sequels, I did not take this as disappointing news. I took it as like redemptive news almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't I love Daisy Ridley as an actress. I don't really dislike the character of Rey, to be completely honest with you. I just think the story, like the writing for the films, were not good. But I don't think that's her fault. I don't think it's
Right, right.
obviously not Daisy's fault. And I think as poor as the films were from a plot perspective, I think Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley are two of the highlights of those films. And so when I heard the news, I was more excited that she has a chance to not only make a new film kind of about the new Jedi Order, but kind of transform the opportunity to transform people's opinion of Rey as a character. Because I think she was also done. I think everyone was done dirty, to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
honest with
yeah,
you.
yeah. Right, you're right.
Like John Boyega definitely was, and I'd be way more surprised if he comes back
Yeah, same.
than if Daisy Ridley or Oscar Isaac came back. Um, but I think it's just an opportunity to see Rey in a new light, hopefully in a way that is a lot more well thought out than the sequel films were. And I hope that they draw a lot of inspiration. I think they can take a note from Mandalorian in this regard, because Mando, this sixth episode or this seventh episode, drew a lot of inspiration from uh, the Timothy Zahn novels and stuff that was legends in EU. I think it would benefit Star Wars a lot for Rey's storyline in this new film to mirror or closely resemble, because I don't want them to copy it, because I feel like that takes away some of the creative, the creativeness to filming a movie. I don't want them to copy the new Jedi Order stuff with Luke and how he formed it, following the, uh, following the fall of the Empire. But I want them to draw on that, because I think effectively that's what we're going to see in this film is Rey, I would assume, not only just creating a new Jedi Order, but sort of going about that process of how to be the leader of that order, how to gather those followers. Maybe it's even going to be the initial stages of that, and like she's just starting creating that order and gathering those
Right.
followers. Maybe that's more likely, actually. So all that to say, I don't think they can do a lot of wrong. I hesitate to say that because
That was a
uh,
question.
because episode 9 was definitely, I think, a low point for a lot of Star Wars fans. Probably myself included in that, but I think the only direction is up, to be honest with you. And I think they have a lot of source material to draw on with Luke, with Luke's new Jedi Order in the EU and Legends stuff. So I hope they refer to that and draw from that with the Daisy Ridley film.
I think my concern would be that we're being trained to watch shows now.
Mm-hmm.
We're being, as Star Wars fans, we're getting used to the 8, 10, 16 episode series.
Mm-hmm.
Now to have a movie again, kind of going back to where we were, where it's going to be what at longest, let's say 2:45, 3 hours, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about how TV shows can lend itself to more time, obviously, so you could character build a little bit more. You're able to do that. I mean, we're talking about one movie. We're not even talking about a trilogy or anything like that. This is one movie that she's getting here. So that's kind of where I would be concerned. Is we, you can't not think that this is something that's a redemptive type of movie for her character, for this franchise, however you want to put it. That's a lot of pressure again to wait, let's say 3 years, and then for it to, either hopefully do well, fall short is a good possibility. Whereas in all these series, you're able to have these full, in-depth, rich storylines. And I'm a little bit worried that we won't have enough time in a movie to do all of that, where it'll be all rushed. Because I'm just used to it. If they would have announced this, but it was like a limited series, a 4 episode series, I would have been more happy, I think, if it were something like that, like a 4 or 6 episode series or something like that. I think that would have been better, because we're used to this now. This is what we're getting used to. Because think about like Andor. Let's look
Hmm.
at Andor and how we didn't really know what to expect going into it, but by the end of it, we were all bought in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
With this, we kind of have that expectation already. We have, hopes and dreams, and that's just kind of what movies do. And we said this early in our podcast, where before you'd have to wait 2 years between movies,
Hmm.
and all the hype would be growing over time, and either it's hit or miss. But in the what we're used to now, the weekly grind of every episode, um, if it's a miss, it's okay. We get another one in a week, you know.
Yeah.
So I am a little concerned about that piece. I feel that we were in a very good spot with the TV series. I know the a lot of the love, a lot of the lore is obviously from the movies, and it makes sense to continue making movies going forward. Um, so something like the Dave Filoni movie makes sense, right?
Hmm.
Because it's talking about an era that is kind of being built right now, right? So it kind of flows through. And I know it's only been 4 years since the Rise of Skywalker, but in terms of everything that's been released since then, that it seems like so much longer, and especially with pandemic,
Good point. Yeah.
2019 seems so far away. To now come back and have this, I mean, it's interesting. I'm still excited for it, but as you know, as Star Wars fans, there's always a little bit of anxiety that you're worried that something's gonna go wrong. And unfortunately, with the sequel trilogies, that's a lot. That's where a lot of that lays. Where a lot of fans, like you said, kind of split down the middle, of people who loved it and people who didn't love it. So, um, all that to say, now you're putting that again on a movie that's coming out in however many years. And let's remember, there were supposed to be other movies that were being made at
Yeah.
this point. There have been other shows that have been canceled, or movies that have been canceled. We don't even hear about anymore.
The Ryan
I
Johnson trilogy.
Right, yeah. So we there is a track record here where the thing movies have been not only mentioned but like announced.
Yeah.
They've had directors already. They've had, and I think there was supposed to be something with Lando. Wasn't there a Lando show
Lando
or a
show
movie at
with
some
Donald
point?
Glover never
Yeah, yeah.
happened.
Something happened, never happened, right? So there's always the possibility that the three movies that were mentioned today, outside the Dave Filoni one, I think that one's probably a
Yeah.
go. You know.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Ray. I mean, the difference with the Ray film is like she is signed to this movie,
Yeah, yeah, right.
whereas the other ones it was like, well, we have a director planned. But, like they
Mm-hmm.
never showed any actor for a Ryan
Oh, right,
Johnson
yeah.
film, or
Gotcha, yeah.
I feel like the planning stage, which is why I would say that was why I said that one I think will be the first one of the three that comes out, is because I think Dave's movie will require more of Mando to be shown,
Mhm.
so just naturally it will come further in time. And the James Mangold one doesn't feel like we have hardly any information on it yet.
Right.
And of course, bringing in Daisy to Star Wars Celebration just kind of gives that vibe and that feel that this is on the nearer horizon. So that was kind of my thinking for that, was because she is signed in the movie, it does feel like it's going to happen
Yeah. Sooner.
maybe like December 2025 is when I'm thinking right now. But that's just kind of a spitball guess.
And to mention, and kind of jumping ahead here, 2025 is the next celebration, which is going to be in Japan.
Oh, that's what I was going to tell you. Yeah, I wanted to talk
Yes.
about this.
Yeah, yeah.
I was so bummed when it wasn't in the US
Oh man.
because
I was so hoping that it was going to be in the US. And
you know what this means? This just means we both have to go to Japan in 2 years.
it's yeah, we've got 2 years to get like sponsors here.
Yeah.
To sell some merch. I mean, we got some time to get this done. We could write off the entire trip. It was going to be fine.
It's a business expense.
Exactly. But yeah, so I mean, imagine this. 2025 is the year that movie comes out, December 2025. The trailer comes out at Celebration. I mean, it kind of lines up. So
Mhm.
I think there is definitely planning towards that. So I wouldn't be surprised when I was saying like movies have gone dark, whatever, within Star Wars. Yeah, I agree. This Rey one probably would not be going dark. I think we're gonna be seeing this one. If we saw it in 2025, the trailer at Celebration, I think that would be very cool, and I hope that's what it is because you and I will be in Japan.
Yes, yes, indeed. The other, not really related to anything we've talked about specifically, the other thing that I kept thinking about as I was watching all these announcements, and I'm bringing it up now because I really wanted to talk about it, and I'm afraid that I'll forget it if I wait till the end to talk about it, is all these announcements are happening, right? And I was thinking the same thing while I was watching this week's episode of Mando. I don't have any kids, but in my mind, I'm thinking like, I'm so excited for like 10 years from now to hopefully to be able to sit down with my son or daughter and like it's like, what do you want to watch? Because there's everything. There's all this Star Wars, you know what I
Right.
mean? Whereas
Right.
like when I was growing up, there was only 6 options. And when
And
when you were growing up there was 3 options.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
it's
and when you were growing up, there were 6 options, and you picked episode 2. So I'm just gonna remind
to be
everyone.
fair, I was born before the prequels came out.
Okay.
So
Okay. Fine.
technically there was only 3 options for the first little bit of my
Okay.
life.
Okay. That's fine.
But
Sure.
I
Technicality.
did. My worst Star Wars decision in my entire life of fandom is that I watched Attack of the Clones as my first Star Wars film. That is
That's fine.
that is a true statement. But yeah, I kept thinking like, 10 years from now, sitting down to show someone who has never seen Star Wars before, it just almost brings a sense of joy to me as a fan and a smile to my face because it's like there's just so much. It's so cool to see, the stories explored from entirely different perspectives, entirely different eras, vast amounts of characters from all different walks of life, and just it is so cool to think about. And so I just wanted to make a point of that this is, I think, one of the times where it always really hits me is at Star Wars Celebration when they're throwing content at you like it's like, what is that phrase, like they're hotcakes or something like that. It is such a cool thought and a cool feeling to think that, I mean, even now at this point in time, if you're
Right.
showing someone who's never seen any Star Wars, you're like, well, first we have to start with these 3.
Yeah.
Then we watch these 3. Then we watch these 3. And then we go back and we fill in the holes with these 2. And then, but wait, there's shows that would during this part,
right.
and this part, and this part, and this part. And it's like,
Right.
which on the flip side, I guess that can be overwhelming for someone who's never seen it all.
So yeah, I mean, regarding that, I mean, out of my friends, out of my that all watch Star Wars, I mean, you and I have a podcast, so obviously we're pretty far deep into it, right? So I've got friends who are super stoked about the Ahsoka show, for
Mhm.
instance, and which we'll get to soon. But I told them, I'm like, well, if you're stoked about that, you should probably watch Rebels. you know, you should so you have a little bit of idea of who these people are, because these people didn't just appear
Right.
right
But
here
I
on
do
this.
love that they're excited about it, having not seen Rebels.
Right.
It's kind of like that. Just, I don't know, like that people can just hop into it at any point.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So, and my sister-in-law, who I mentioned before on the pod, same thing. I'm like, hey, maybe you don't have to watch all of it, but like watch these episodes, or just to get an idea. Watch the first season, see how you feel about it, and because I mean, it's like it's kind of like, I don't want to call it a disease, but it's kind of like you want to spread the spread all of the information out,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the reason it was so cool to see Zeb in live action was because we saw him, in animated form for 4 seasons or whatever. So to make that jump is really cool. And we've talked time and time again about the interweavings of all the different stories. So and I mean, to the point where we're talking about it for 2 hours on a podcast. I mean, this we could do this for 4 hours if we really wanted to, I think. But yeah, there's just so much out there. And you were saying like, 10 years from now, literally today, we could do this today and have the same kind of talk.
Yeah, it makes me pretty excited about just Star Wars. I think I think growing up it was like, well, this is the story. And I love Star Wars, but I don't think most people imagined it being where it is today. Like if you were to go back to like 2010, there was people that were like, "Oh, will George ever make like an episode 7, 8, 9?" But it didn't feel like there was a lot of serious discussion around it. And now it's like, how many shows do we have at this point? Like
Mm-hmm.
10, 15? I don't even know. It feels like it's that many, honestly. It's probably not 15, but
Yeah.
it's just wild how far we have come in what, a dozen years. I guess, well, since Lucas sold Lucas film, it's been less than a decade.
Mm-hmm.
So to think that all of this that we've gotten in the past decade is going to be multiplied times two, if not exponentially, in the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's just pretty fun to think about. It makes me really excited.
Liam Neeson was wrong.
Liam Neeson was wrong. Yes. Star Wars not oversaturated. But yeah, that's kind of just sort of a sidebar sentimental thing that I wanted to bring
Sure.
up. And uh so I guess we've discussed the movies a little bit. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you about the movies before we get to the TV shows. Okay, pick one of those three. Which are you the most excited for? Because I know what my answer is.
You know what your answer is?
Yeah.
I think I know your answer too. I mean, I would say the Daisy Ridley one for me,
Uh-huh.
just because I both wanted to succeed, and I wanted to succeed for two reasons: to have kind of a nice story for her, for her character, as well as you know give the sequel trilogy a little bit more redemption. Kind of like what you said too. So I think there's part of me, and I like I said, I loved her character. I think she like you said, I think a lot of those actors were done, a lot of those characters were done dirty. So I think the hopefully the redemption of her character will be here.
Yeah, I think I'm the most hopeful for that
Hmm.
movie. But the one I'm most excited for, it's actually tough because if you attach Dave's name to a movie, I almost just inherently want to pick that one. Um, and I love The Mandalorian, don't get me wrong, but The New Republic is not really one of my time periods that I personally find the most love for. And anything close to the Old Republic, I definitely do. Honestly, one of the biggest bummers was that we didn't get an Old Republic movie.
Yeah.
You know what? Also, they didn't talk about what was that other video game, Eclipse, that's supposed to be coming out in a few
Oh right,
years.
yeah.
I don't know if that's supposed to take place during the Old Republic or not, but
I feel like it was supposed to.
yeah, I hope we get more info on that soon. All that to say, the Dawn of the Jedi movie is probably the most intriguing one to me because having read that book and I'm loving the era of Dawn of the Jedi and of course Old Republic as well, which in terms of the newly released Star Wars timeline takes place right after Dawn of the Jedi. I'm gonna go with movie two. Not to say I'm not excited for the other two because I definitely am, but
Right.
I love the idea of seeing stuff that takes place well before the High Republic. So
Right. Yeah.
shifting gears a little bit over to TV shows. There is a ton to talk about here as well. I think probably the bulk of the information was stuff regarding Ahsoka. But then, of course, we also did get info involving Skeleton Crew, the Jude Law show, which has been scheduled for a while now. I don't think that one or Acolyte has an official release date yet. I think Acolyte might have been confirmed as 2024, but I don't remember seeing a month on Acolyte. But of course, Ahsoka is going to be out this year, 2023, in August. At the time of this recording, that's only about 4 months away, which is a pretty cool thought that we
Yes.
are officially, what is that, 16 weeks away from getting an
That's so
Ahsoka
close.
show. Yeah.
When you put it that way, that's way closer.
Yeah. Which, to tie into what you were talking about a little bit earlier with the sentimentality, I think that's a word, of
Sure.
Star Wars, um, and just kind of how it's this vast galaxy that's all sort of tied together across shows now, and they're bringing people in from animated to live action and live action to animated. If you think about it, Ahsoka as a show, the characters within this show, they are all originally animated show characters, primarily from Rebels, maybe even all from Rebels. I mean, we saw not only Thrawn, which is probably where the bulk of the excitement from that trailer came from, but we saw Sabine in the trailer. We saw Harrison Dula, which, by the way, Harrison Dula, for those of you that don't know, is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, which is the wife of Ewan McGregor.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah,
Actually, didn't know that. Nice.
yeah. So
Hello there. All right. Yeah.
hello there, yeah. So Harrison Dula in this new Ahsoka show will be played by Obi-Wan's wife, if you will.
Oh.
Not really, but you know what I mean. So it's cool.
Headcanon. Headcanon.
Yes, yes. So it's cool to see the family profession of working in Star Wars being extended a little bit to Mary Elizabeth in that situation. We saw Chopper in the trailer, which is pretty cool. I think Chopper is. It's really hard to beat R2D2 as the favorite droid, but Chopper is right up there,
So
man.
good. Yeah.
He is great, and it's funny because we've never seen him in live action. Like
Mhm.
how rare is that the favorite droid of someone can be something that's not even seen in a live action film. I think it's pretty cool that he's going to be included in this as well. We even saw Ezra on a hologram, which presumably will be a lot of the plot of this show. I would think is like Ahsoka not only going after Thrawn, but also tracking down Ezra in the process as well. It was confirmed we're only going to be getting 8 episodes, much like the Mandalorian seasons have done of the new Ahsoka show. I am curious how many seasons Ahsoka is going to be,
Mhm.
and I'm praying it's more than just one.
Right.
I want this to be a show that really builds upon Rebels in a way that doesn't make Star Wars messy. And what I mean by that, and I guess I don't want to go too deep into Rebels in case anyone hasn't seen it. But for those of you that haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, I would A, highly recommend, and B, there is a portion of Star Wars Rebels which really gets into the whole like time travel stuff. Not really time travel, but like alternate time paths is maybe a good way of saying it. The way it is described in Rebels is like the world between worlds, I think is what it's called. And so I think you have to tread very lightly as a writer and a director when you bring that sort of thing into a show, because then it's like a can of worms. It's like, well, could they go back and change this? Like for
Yeah.
anything that happens in the future. And so I want them to navigate Ahsoka in a way that doesn't like infringe upon the integrity of stuff that we've already seen in Star Wars, and us saying like, oh, well, I guess they could just change that because they could go back between the world between worlds and blah 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 blah.
Right.
So that is something I am going to be especially looking for when it comes to Ahsoka, is how they handle that. But Lars Mikkelsen, this is something I also was going to say, the actor that plays Thrawn in Rebels is returning to play Thrawn in live action, which is also pretty cool. An iconic part of that trailer as well.
Yeah. This is what we were waiting for from the Star Wars Celebration. An Ahsoka trailer, an Ahsoka, the date for it. I think they look great. I thought Sabine. I think the casting for Sabine was so good.
Yes, spot on.
I mean that she looks exactly like what I would imagine a live action Sabine would look like. So nicely done there. Um, I feel like I wanted a little bit more from Hera's prosthetics and kind of makeup and how it looks. I mean, she looks like they painted her green, it looked a little bit. I wanted a little bit more from it. I am interested in seeing Chopper in live action because if you've watched Rebels, Chopper's very very animated,
Hmm.
and he spins the top a lot. He has the little arms that come out and gets very animated. So I'm curious how Chopper is going to be in live action. But like you said, the announcement of Lars Mikkelsen being Thrawn was was huge because of like you said being the voice of Thrawn in Rebels was to have that cry because I think I'm trying to think other than obviously Bo-Katan and Katie Sackhoff,
Hmm.
the person who voiced them is actually the person who's that who it is in live action as well. So I think that's pretty cool that they've done that again here with Thrawn. And I don't know if you saw the this was I gotta love the internet investigators. When we first initially saw Thrawn, like the first trailer that
I
came
think I
out.
heard about this. I
Yeah,
know what you're gonna
when
say.
you first saw Thrawn, the only shot we saw of him was from behind,
Yeah.
wherever. So somebody went out there, got a picture of Lars Mikkelsen, and lined up perfectly with
The
the
ears.
ears.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, looks like I mean, you're probably right. Oh, and we should mention that part of what they do at Star Wars Celebration is that they'll show, you know, the general audience being people that are also at home, like me and Ben, certain trailers, certain tidbits of the shows. But then for the people who are at Celebration, actually at these panels, they sometimes get a little bit of extra. So, for the Ahsoka trailer, they actually got a little bit more than what we saw at home, particularly and cover your ears if you don't want to hear it. Particularly, we saw Sabine with a lightsaber, which I believe is assumed to be Kanan. Not Kanan. Oh, sorry. Rest in peace, Kanan. Um,
Ezra's right.
Ezra's
Yeah.
Ezra's lightsaber, and it looks like she is fighting um whoever the other woman is in that series that has a red lightsaber. So I think that was pretty cool to see her because I mean we've seen Sabine wield the dark saber too. So and there was a whole episode in Rebels where I believe Kanan was training her, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
with the dark saber. So to kind of see that now, and that's what I'm saying. You need to see. I mean, you don't need to, but it's makes a more fun experience when you are able to go back to Rebels and say, "Oh, I remember when she had the dark saber and she was doing that, and now she has Ezra's lightsaber here as well." So I think, yeah, I'm so excited. Sabine and Hera, I think I've mentioned, are one couple of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. Um, Hera, I've even mentioned when we were talking about International Women's Day that she is my favorite female character in Star Wars. So I'm super excited to see apparently Obi-Wan's wife in Star Wars here, and of course Ahsoka with Rosario Dawson. Played such a great role when we saw her earlier, and to what you're saying about hopefully this is more than just one season. I mean, I feel that it's going to be. It's got to be, especially with Dave as high as he is at with Star Wars. He's gonna want to have Ahsoka around for a very long time.
Hmm.
So whether it's four seasons, 5 seasons, I feel like they know they've got something, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying about Grogu, where you knew you had something with Grogu. So that's maybe, with your theory, maybe they just kind of throw him in here and there
Could
for this
be.
season. But with Ahsoka, I mean, we already know. I mean, there's a whole like fan base for specifically Ahsoka here.
Yeah.
Whereas The Mandalorian was kind of out of the blue. Andor was, I mean, we knew the character, but whatever. Ahsoka literally has
Like
people
it's
cosplaying her
her own fan
everywhere.
base. Yes.
Yeah, she has her own fan base. Ashley Eckstein, who who was voiced Ahsoka, has her own line, her own clothing line, based off of the character. So if this were to go one season, I would be shocked. But so I think this is going to be one of the ones that, and hopefully it's just done very well, and they could have a meaningful story through season. But I mean, where Rebels left off, with Ezra being gone, with and we didn't mention Agent Callus
Hmm.
from Rebels also. Where is he at? Does he fall in here at some point as well? So there's a lot of excitement around Ahsoka, and rightfully so.
Yeah, it's definitely what I am personally most excited for of anything that they've talked about and announced at Celebration. It was funny with the Sabine thing, which they showed in I guess, the trailer to the people who were at Celebration. People originally thought that was an accidental leak because in one of the interviews with Natasha Liu, the actress who plays Sabine, she was talking about being required to do lightsaber training, and people were like, "What?" And like, did she just like spoil or confirm
Yeah, yeah.
something unintentionally? But the people at Celebration had already seen that image of her with the lightsaber, but
Right.
it's that was something that we haven't seen yet, at least maybe a non bootleg version.
Right. And to add on to that story, when they interviewed Rosario Dawson, um, I already forgot Hera's actress's
Oh,
name.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Natasha, when they interviewed the three of them on the Celebration stage in front of everybody. This is outside of the panels. I guess this was right after the Ahsoka panel. They were talking about lightsaber training, and
Yeah.
they officially they asked Ahsoka about it. I mean, Ahsoka. They asked Rosario about it, and then she's like, "Yeah, it was really fun, right?" And she looked at Natasha, and then she was like, she was like deer in headlights,
Oh,
like
that's what it
she's like,
was.
she
Yeah.
was like, oh, and then Rosario Dawson was like, "Can we talk about it?" And she's like, "Oh, never mind." And then she just kind of skips it. So if you happen to go back and watch that, because you could tell she's like, "Oh wait, we can't talk about it." Okay, and then she just kind of plows through the rest of the interview, which is pretty funny.
Honestly, being in a Star Wars show or movie as an actor has to be like one of the most just stressful things in the months like after you finish filming, I mean.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you have this probably 12-month period where, well, for movies it's probably even longer than that, but you have this like 9 to 18-month period, let's say. Like 9 months for a TV show and maybe even 18 months for a movie, where how the movie ends, or what happens to a specific character, or what thing
Right.
goes down in the movie that's the big reveal, and you've signed an NDA.
Right. Yeah.
And as much as you obviously aren't trying to spoil it for anyone, sometimes like I feel like accidents happen, and so I
Right.
would
Yeah.
I would be so
Well, yeah.
nervous to go on a
And
talk show,
and especially if you're talking about something like Star Wars or Marvel,
yeah,
I mean, it's not like you're not talking to anybody. You've
right,
got press junkets, you've got all these interviews, so you're constantly talking about the show or the movie.
yeah.
And of course, like you said, all of the information, but I mean, why even go on the interview at this point? You're just like, nope, can't say anything, That's kind of
It
the whole
was
thing.
so much fun making it. We had a really good time. I'm excited for people to see it. Like that's
Yeah,
like all
yeah.
they can say because they're so
Right.
worried about, spoiling something, which
Right.
is
And I mean,
understandable.
with Rosario Dawson in this instance, they just showed it. They just showed it to everybody, but she didn't realize it was only to that audience. It wasn't
Right.
for the people at home.
Right. Yeah, it's lots to be excited about with Ahsoka. Oh man, 16 weeks. It's gonna be great stuff. Um, Skeleton Crew is one that's I guess hasn't been on my radar that much,
Hmm.
but I guess because the idea of it doesn't necessarily interest me right off the bat about hearing about it. Maybe part of that is because I think it takes place in that New Republic era. But I don't know. I think I have a little bit more excitement around it than I did prior to Celebration.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my main thing with this show is I just don't know as much about it as I would like
Same.
to. And this show is actually finished filming. This finished filming 3 months ago. It finished in January of 2023, which people are speculating it may even come out as soon as December of this year, which would
Mm-hmm.
be pretty cool if we got it. Which I guess that would put it maybe like a month or 2 months after Ahsoka finishes. Um, I guess I can just read a little short snippet about it. It's not so much about plot as much as it is an overview of the show. Does not have an official release date, but we know it's set to come out in 2023. That being said, a general time frame based on a few known facts. We know that the series started production in 2022 September. Star Wars shows usually take a year and a half to appear. It should be followed by Ahsoka, which is coming out in August. We know now, and that this series sets up for a mid to late summer release. This sets the series up for a mid to late summer release, assuming that Lucasfilm doesn't want to overlap their shows. Oh, based on that, we can expect Skeleton Crew to release in late winter 2023.
Okay.
So I feel like they just said two things that were
Yeah,
opposite.
they're opposite. Yeah, right.
But winter 2023, I guess, is when they're expecting this show to come out. Something that I guess we were talking about maybe before we even started recording, I don't even remember at this point, is that I read something saying that he is a Jedi, the Jude Law character, which is something I didn't know before this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a trailer for Skeleton Crew was shown to people at Celebration. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
I really want that one.
Yeah.
I honestly, well, I think I would still rather have the Acolyte trailer, but the Skeleton Crew one, I just don't know a lot about it, which is why that one, I think I would almost want that trailer equally as much as Acolyte.
Right.
Which is something, speaking of Acolyte, I guess, did you have any thoughts on Skeleton Crew before I
I
started
mean, it's the
talking about
same. I know nothing about really what's even happening with it. I know it's Jude Law and a bunch of child actors that are in it, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think there's more unknowns with that show. Hopefully they start releasing these trailers to the public really soon. I would hate for them to wait all the way until I think D23 is in like September.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have to wait till September to see the actual versions of these trailers, I'm going to be pretty bummed.
Yeah.
But Skeleton Crew is one that I guess I'm more excited for now than I would have been previous to Star Wars Celebration. One that I have been excited for a while, and this is definitely the most information we've had on it, really since it's been announced. I guess it was first announced. Was it at Celebration in 21, or was it at D20? Or the Disney convention last year?
That was last year. I feel like it was last year.
It might have been last year, but yeah, the Acolyte is one that examines things more from a dark side perspective, which I particularly enjoy. This one will almost certainly not be coming out this year. However, I think it's scheduled for an early to mid 2024 release. Man, this was reported to be in development all the way back in 2020, if you can believe that.
Wow, really?
So I think maybe it was announced. This was announced, I think, before COVID. Does that sound right?
That must have been then, yeah.
Yeah, this one is set between the High Republic and the beginning of the prequels. So this is
ready.
Yeah, this is an era where we really haven't, at least in canon stuff, haven't delved into a lot. Although there's been like snippets, especially in the prequels, where they'll talk about it here and there. But this will be the furthest back Star Wars that we've seen in live action.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the height of the Jedi. It's gonna be really cool to see this. If you like lightsabers, let me put it that way. If you like lightsabers, this show is going to be for you.
Now, out of the two of us, you're like the historian, right? So,
I don't know if I would say that. There's some people who put me to.
I'm saying out of the two of us, you know.
Yeah.
So would a Plagueis be around this time?
Yeah, so it was initially speculated when this show was announced that the acolyte could potentially be Palpatine. I don't think
Oh, okay.
that doesn't seem to be the direction they're going. Because I think this actually takes place before Palpatine would have been born.
Okay, gotcha.
I think it's 100 years before Episode 1. I feel like I read that somewhere. Maybe those of you watching the video version of the podcast can comment down below if you know exactly when this takes place. But I think it's before Sidious or before Palpatine is born, which could mean that Plagueis is around at this time. But I don't know how much of that they will either draw inspiration from, or maybe they'll just throw him into the show.
That'd be fun.
I'm not opposed. Hey, if you want to throw some Plagueis into this show,
Yeah.
I'd be all for it.
Have I ever told you?
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Have you ever seen that meme of the it's just like stuff like everyday average stuff like a coffee mug. I saw one that was a shot glass and the words were like really small and you're like, what are the words on that shot glass? And it's literally the whole monologue of Palpatine from episode 3.
That's awesome.
And they'll throw it on like a t-shirt or, stuff like that. The other part about this show that I think is enticing as well is it's being marketed as a mystery thriller.
Oh.
Which I don't know about you. If I could pick any genre of TV show that is my favorite, it's probably mystery thriller. So the fact that they're bringing that to Star Wars, I'm like, all right,
that's crazy.
Dark Side Users takes place during the High Republic. Mystery thriller, sign me up. I think this is going to be my favorite Star Wars show. I'm calling it right now.
Wow. You know Ahsoka's coming out in August, right?
I don't doubt that I will love Ahsoka. I think more of my love for Ahsoka is the character than the timeline.
Mm.
And I love the other characters too. I think Sabine and Hera are great. But again, it's just like the pre-episode 1 stuff is so exciting to me.
Right.
I get pretty stoked about that.
Yeah.
So this is something that I personally am probably the most excited for. Well, yeah, right now it's Ahsoka because Ahsoka is so close. But when Acolyte gets closer, I think it's gonna be more exciting for me personally. Even though I can understand how most people are probably way more excited for Ahsoka. But anyways, I'm pumped for Acolyte. All that to say. And then Andor season 2 officially got a release date. That is, gosh, this seems so far away.
It does.
What would this be? 16 months from the time of this recording? August of 2024 is the release date for season 2. And it wasn't marketed as the last season, so that's
right.
Worth pointing out. And I'm excited for season 2 of Andor. I just think it's going to suffer from kind of the same thing that Mando suffered from between seasons 2 and 3. And that there was such a large time span, a large time gap, that some people kind of fell off the hype bandwagon.
Right.
But I think Andor is a show that, because it's not necessarily for the mainstream Star Wars viewer, I think it will be all right.
Now, is that the one that's supposed to take place over 4 years in a season, or is that Bad Batch? I already forgot. Which
No,
one
I think that might be Andor.
Okay.
I think there is a time jump, and I feel like I read that somewhere too. Yeah. Anyway, I'll have to look into that. Speaking of Bad Batch, though, something that was announced as a new season, and as the last season, was the 3rd season of Bad Batch, which is it was so weird because 6 weeks ago, if you would have told me they were going to announce this, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I guess. And then at the end of season 2, it's like, wow, they could do like at least 2 more seasons of this. Yeah. Now this is going to be our last season with the crew, so kind of bittersweet, but I hope they bring that show to a good conclusion. I think it is almost, I don't want to say 100%. It is very likely we see Omega in live action
Oh yeah,
in the
I would think so
next.
too.
It could even be in the Filoni movie, if we're being completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I feel like adult Omega could get thrown into the.
I'm saying she's
Oh,
gonna be in Mando already.
you think?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Oh, dude, that'd be so cool.
In season 5.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there's no way they introduce Omega as a character and then they make 3 seasons of this show where she is like the central focus, more or less, and then we just never see her again.
Right. Yeah.
And there's been all this stuff about cloning, not just in Bad Batch. So I think we see live action Omega, hopefully in the next few years, if not even sooner than that. And then stuff we've already talked about as well with the May the 4th debuts coming up are the Star Wars Young Jedi show, the children's TV show. I think I probably will watch it just to
Oh yeah,
say
we'll
that I
watch it then,
have.
yeah. Yeah. Totally.
But I more or less, in my head it's gonna be like a Star Wars version of Wonder Pets. If anyone out there has ever seen Wonder Pets, that's kind of what I'm envisioning. And then the second season of Visions is something I'm also super stoked for. I did learn, I was telling Joey before we started recording, that there's an episode called I Am Your Mother. So I'm like, that's kind of weird. I don't, it seems kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
But the first seasons of Visions is incredible. It's not, it's in this weird category of, it's like non-canonical canon, basically. Like it doesn't impact or affect any other Star Wars canon in any way, but because it's made after the acquisition of Star Wars by Disney, it's like canon, if you know what I mean. So, all that to say, I think that gives the creators more freedom to kind of do as they please with these shows because they're independent studios from all over the world where Disney's not hanging over their backs like, well, if you do this, you can't do that because in this movie this happens and that's going to affect this.
Yeah, throw Grogu in there, please.
Yeah, that'd actually be kind of cool if we see Grogu in Visions. So that comes out in, what is it? 3 weeks. Whew.
Yeah, nice.
Gonna be here sooner than we know it. And then Tales of the Jedi season 2 was confirmed. I didn't see a whole lot of info on that other than the fact that it was just confirmed. We don't know if it's going to continue to be like a Dooku Ahsoka thing or if it's going to focus on other people. I would assume it's probably going to be others.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I think that when it was confirmed, I think it was when Dave Filoni was on his, I think it was the Clone Wars panel. I believe that's the 15-year Clone Wars panel, which you haven't watched. It was very touching. He was basically in tears talking to Ashley Eckstein and James Arnold Taylor and Sam Witwer and saying how important they were to all of Star Wars, and it was a very nice moment. But they did ask him a little bit about Tales of the Jedi and kind of how it was to create that, and he was very he talked about how he was excited about exploring these stories, and he would love to have more stories of more Jedi. And that's kind of when he dropped the bomb and said, "Yeah, that's why we'll have a season 2 for Tales of the Jedi." And obviously, everyone's excited. So I think you and I loved it so much. I think that was one of the more fun reaction videos that I think we did.
yeah,
Seeing especially the Ahsoka versus the Inquisitor fight. I think that was probably the highlight of that particular video. But so yeah, I'm excited for season 2. I don't think they announced anything as far as dates or anything like that, or who would be involved, or but no, it's coming. I'm excited.
yeah. Dave, just to like kind of move towards wrapping this episode up, Dave is such an important key central figure to Star Wars. Can you imagine where Star Wars would be if he was not involved in the Clone Wars originally?
Right.
Like so much so that Dave has almost become like singularly identified as more or less the new George Lucas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, there's other people like Jon Favreau who has done incredible things for Star Wars with Mando and going into the future with other shows too. But I think what binds a lot of Star Wars fans together as sort of this safety net, if you will, is that Dave is sort of always lurking in the background of everything now as this voice of like, well, like, let's do this or let's do that.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean,
right.
he's like weaving the web of Star Wars as we go through all of this, which is really cool because I think it's important to have someone like that, not only who is like really good at telling stories, but has, I mean, you said with his emotional, speech that he gave on the panel. I mean, he is personally involved and affected by Star Wars. Like this is what he grew up with. He loves it. He has a passion for it, and that's someone you want in that position making a lot of those creative decisions. So, all that to say, I am appreciative of Dave always for his efforts in making Star Wars what it is for all of us.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, shout out Dave Filoni. I don't know if you'll ever hear this or not, but on the off chance that you do, we love you, Dave. We appreciate you.
And we would love some tickets to Star Wars Celebration 2025.
Yeah, exactly. So, in conclusion, incredible amounts of Star Wars content to be excited for in the future. The 3 films, lots of TV shows, the next of which will obviously be Ahsoka on the near horizon, coming out in August of 2023 this year, only about 16 weeks away. Also worth noting real quickly, we did want to include this, that the fifth Indiana Jones movie, Dial of Destiny, a new trailer was also released at Star Wars Celebration. So fans there got to see a little sneak peek into that. And I think the reason that's important is it kind of gives an insight into how Disney is going to handle the 3 Star Wars movies, particularly with the CGI stuff with Harrison Ford too, and how they're going to handle Luke maybe in the Dave Filoni film potentially. So important to note there as well. Finally, Joey, if you had to pick one thing announced at Celebration that you are the most excited for, and you could only pick one. Actually, let's phrase it this way. You pick one thing, everything else is cast into the abyss.
Oh my gosh. If you're giving me that, good lordy. I think I would take the Ahsoka trailer from it.
Okay.
Because like I said, Hera, Sabine, Thrawn. Yeah, I think I love all of that. So I don't want to throw everything into the abyss, but if you're making me do it, I would pick that.
I think I would probably go with the same thing. Even though like Acolyte and Dawn of the Jedi,
there's no trailer though, so they didn't really give me anything.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, there's just so much to be excited about.
Yeah.
To tie it all back in to sort of the sentimental thing, I can't even remember if I talked about that during part 1 of this podcast or part 2, but it is why we love Star Wars so much. There is just so much to be explored, so much to be covered. With this new timeline in particular, we're going to be getting stories, it seems, for years and years and years to come, which as lifelong Star Wars fans is music to our ears. I can't be more excited, to be honest with you. Do you have any closing thoughts or comments or anything you wanted to discuss before we hop out of here?
Star Wars, man. Star Wars.
It is truly a great time to be a Star Wars fan. And again, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. We know this was a bit of a longer one. If you haven't managed to check out part 1 of this podcast episode, where we covered our thoughts and reactions to episode 7 of the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, definitely check that out. And then speaking, of course, of Mandalorian, we will be back next week, not only with a podcast episode, but also with our live reaction to the season 3 Mandalorian finale. Hopefully we get to see a little bit of Thrawn in there. It's going to be a really fantastic episode. And of course, if you have not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, we would really appreciate that so very much. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Hoth Hangout podcast. We greatly love and appreciate every single one of you. Joey, any more thoughts or comments?
Was that what he said?
Wait, your mic cut out for the first half of that. What'd you say?
Long live the Empire.
Long live the Empire. Was that Gideon?
That was Gideon, yeah.
Long live the Empire. Well, we look forward to covering all of it in the very near future, and may the Force be with you always.